Welcome to VidZ. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Today we're going to talk about one of the most popular parts of ObamaCare, coverage for pre-existing conditions. To understand how this can work, let's see what Max does.
Desiree, isn't this a great morning for an espresso?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to doing some blow and riding in your new BMW when we're done.
Oh no. Oh no.
Max, are you okay?
No, I'm not. I feel like an elephant suddenly sat on my chest.
Shall I call 911? Barista. Call 911 and get an ambulance.
Max, what seems to be the problem?
I feel like I've got an elephant sitting on my chest.
That sounds like a real emergency. EMTAL requires us to handle your emergency right away, so we'll skip the insurance paperwork. Dr. Hart will take care of you right away.
Max, I'm Betty. I need to know how you are going to pay for your care. Let's see. The ambulance brought you to the hospital. You were seen in the emergency department and then Dr. Hart took care of you in the heart cath lab. You know that without all this you would be dead from a massive heart attack, don't you?
How could I have a heart attack? I'm not even 30 years old.
Dr. Hart said that your cocaine use had a big part in it. How are you going to pay? By time we add it all up, you owe us about $80,000.
Where am I going to come up with that kind of money?
Your BMW costs almost that much.
Well, I don't have a job that pays much, and I sure don't have insurance.
Why didn't you say so? We can handle that. ObamaCare is perfect for you. Because you don't make much money, you'll be eligible for a subsidy. That will take care of your premiums. And as soon as you sign on the line, ObamaCare will cover all those bills.
Notice what Max did. He had no health coverage, then had a very expensive medical emergency, was treated, and then got covered by ObamaCare. He was treated because EMTALA says you can't turn him away, and then ObamaCare said, oh, there are no consequences to you not having insurance. Oh, there might be a little penalty, but it's not much. This makes about as much sense as totaling your car, then buying car insurance, then making the insurance company pay for you totaling your car. Or burning your house down, buying insurance after it's in ashes, and then requiring the company to pay for it. This is totally insane. Insurance is supposed to protect us from the big things that may happen in the future, while we take care of the little things. No insurance company can survive when they're required to pay out big funds after the fact without being able to collect premiums along the way. But this is why people like pre-existing conditions coverage. It's a freebie. It lets Max own his BMW and then have somebody else pay for his heart attack. ObamaCare's coverage for pre-existing conditions was sold using sob stories where Jane has been out of work and can't afford anything, and then developed this horrible cancer and now can't get coverage and can't get care because it's too expensive and nobody will touch her. Yes, there are stories like that, but they are the minority. Most of the pre-existing conditions cases are like Max, where people simply said, I'd rather buy a BMW than to buy insurance. Now, the reason for this is really pretty simple, and we discussed it in our brief history of ObamaCare. When insurance was not an above-the-line deductible expense to the employer without counting against your income, then you had to buy it yourself. The insurance you bought wasn't coverage for everything the way Obamacare wants you to think you're going to get. In fact, it was coverage only for those high dollar things you couldn't afford. Well, if all you buy is that kind of catastrophic coverage, then what you pay is not a whole lot. You're responsible for the small stuff. And doctors and hospitals look and say, hey, I'm going to have to go directly to the patient for all of the smaller stuff. And guess what? Their prices are going to reflect it. But, people say, isn't medicine more expensive now because it has so much more technology? No. When I was in college, Hewlett-Packard introduced the first scientific calculator, the HP 35. It cost $399 in 1972 dollars. If we look today, I can buy a scientific calculator for $20 in 2016 dollars. Now, when we look at constant dollars, that scientific calculator today costs of 1% of what it did back then. And back then, the engineers at Marshall Space Flight Center grabbed every scientific calculator they could get because it made their job so much easier and so much more accurate. They were willing to spend their own money on it. Now let's look today. Look at all that magic technology. We have CT scanning, we have MR scanning, we have all sorts of fancy stereotactic guided techniques for neurosurgery, for heart work, and so on. Is there any reason those things should cost the mega millions of dollars that they do? No. It's the law of subsidy in action. Since 1943, healthcare has been subsidized in the United States. And remember the law of subsidy. When you subsidize something, you get more of it, and it gets more expensive. But you say, shouldn't doctors be well paid? After all, they're highly skilled people who have gone through college, medical school, years of residency before they get into practice, where they make money, and they have debts, some as high as $400,000 and $500,000 by then. Shouldn't they get paid well? Well, let's back up a minute. When I graduated in 1976, my total cost for room, board, and tuition was $25,000 for all of medical school. And that was already inflated by the government subsidizing medical education. Now remember the law of subsidy. When you subsidize something, you get more of it and it gets more expensive. That's what's happening in medicine. All of that money is because government has stuck its finger in where it didn't belong. Let's go back for a minute and look at how pre-existing conditions were handled before Obamacare. It's really pretty simple. If you had something going on, let's say you had coronary artery disease, and you hadn't had insurance and you moved on to a new plan, then you would be subject to one of two things. Either you would be through an exclusion period of perhaps 6 months, which was common, before anything related to coronaries would be covered, or they would jack up the rate and say, we'll cover you from day one, but you're going to pay a much higher premium. The third thing that happened was if you moved from job to job, you had insurance here, and then you move over there. COBRA said whatever coverage you had here could then move across to there so that you didn't have any gaps in coverage. And that allowed people to continue getting coverage for pre-existing conditions. Very simple mechanism, not a big deal. But the problem here is, once again, most of the people who had pre-existing conditions and didn't have coverage were people like Max. They're not people like Jane, who has an honest emergency that she couldn't cover. And remember, there are ways that if the market were allowed to work, Jane could have been covered. It's called charity. But remember, we talked about this last time. Charity is illegal. Why is the pre-existing coverage under Obamacare popular? Really quite simple. People have been sold Jane's sob story. They don't want anybody to be denied coverage who was just so poor they couldn't get coverage before. When the real problem here is charity's illegal and the law of subsidy has made insurance too expensive. We've got to stop this sort of distortion. Repealing Obamacare in its entirety is just the first step. We have to march back all the way before 1943 and get rid of the government's involvement in health insurance completely. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.